Hey guys. All right, so welcome to day 53 of 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself. And this is a good one. It's uh it's a good one. I'm going to leave it at that. It ultimately comes down to, well, you know what? I'm just going to start, okay? Day 53. Hi LJ. Day 53, keep thinking, keep thinking. All right, so if somebody could just give me a thumbs up, let me know if you can hear me. I'm having some serious sound issues lately, and I don't even know why. Um, so keep thinking, keep thinking. What does that mean? Here we go. So here's the question for you. Thank you. Where is it that you think motivation comes from? It comes from your thoughts. Thank you for the hearts. You're so sweet. Motivation comes from our thoughts. Every act is preceded by a thought that inspires an action. When we quit thinking, we lose our motivation to act. Hang with me here, this gets really good. We easily slip into pessimism, and pessimism leads to less thinking. And from there, it is a downward spiral. Negativity becomes passivity, feeding upon itself like a deadly cancer. So what the author is talking about here is that, when you get to a point in your life, you can get to a point in your life where, you find that you are just constantly seeing the negative of things. And maybe you used to be a pessimist, but now you find that you're a little bit more, you used to be an optimist, but now you're a little bit more pessimistic. And if that's the case, this particular day's lesson is for you, because it basically comes down to how pessimism is a slippery slope. You easily start to slide into this quitter's mentality. And you guys, believe me, I've had pessimistic days. I'm generally speaking an optimist. I live both lives, but this is an interesting talk in particular, because I think it helps us to examine ourselves and to start further questioning ourselves and why we think the way we think, which has kind of been a component of what we've talked about this entire 53-day journey. So I'm going to give you guys an example of the difference between a pessimist and an optimist. A pessimist might have, an optimist and a pessimist both have a dirty garage. The pessimist says, I'm going to wake up this weekend on Saturday morning and I'm totally going to clean out the garage. So he wakes up Saturday morning, he goes out to the garage, he sees the giant mess in his garage, and he says, forget that, I'm out. No one could possibly clean that whole thing in one day. And the pessimist way of thinking is, it's all or nothing. And they think that they think in catastrophic absolutes. They either have to do it perfectly or they can't do it at all. And I don't know about you guys, but I find that resonates with me. That I relate to that. I relate to the whole, if I can't do it, I'm not doing any of it kind of attitude. And I didn't even realize that, I have pessimistic tendencies, even though I'm a self-proclaimed optimist. Whereas the optimist, in this example, we just went through the pessimist example, so now let's take a look at how the optimist approaches this. He has the dirty garage. He wakes up, he says, I'm going to do it this Saturday. He wakes up Saturday morning. He goes out there, and he has the same response. He says, forget this. But instead of going back inside the house, he keeps thinking. He keeps thinking. He says, I can't do the whole garage today, but I could do some of it. So let me break the garage into 4 pieces, and every Saturday I'll do one section. I'll break it into 4 sections. Every Saturday I'll do every section. And then the pessimist, who has a dirty garage, continues to have a dirty garage, whereas the optimist has a clean garage in 1 month. So I don't know about you guys, but that really resonates with me. And I find that, that's kind of something I'm just now coming out of, in realizing that I had an all or nothing personality, especially moving into this house. I figured if I can't unpack everything today and have all the pictures hung and all the walls painted and all the rooms remodeled. Why unpack? Might as well not, right? I was thinking that. So the pessimist sets their problems aside because they have the attitude or all or nothing, whereas the optimist, I don't know why I'm struggling with that, they realize that they can do something. They can have what my life coach has taught me as sloppy success. They can take action. They can see that it's progress, not perfection. And they can kind of adopt that model for their lives. The pessimist tends to be hopeless, and they think that nothing can be done, and they quit thinking too soon, and they start to turn into quitters. And you know, when I first read that, I thought, you know, that's not fair to call an optimist a quitter. It's a gross generalization. But the reality is yeah, when I look back at my quitting scenario that I just explained about moving, I gave up. I was quitting unpacking. Because if I couldn't unpack and move into a house that was completely bam, like this, like on a TV show, completely brand new, then I wasn't going to unpack. And it was very subconscious, but I was totally doing that. Whereas the optimist might have the same initial response, but they keep digging. They're very tough-minded, and there are many studies on the lifespan and the longevity of optimists. Optimists tend to have more success and live longer than pessimists. What? So here's a really good example, and this is about a movie that you guys probably have seen. I've not seen it, but I've read about it before when I was younger, but I think I'm going to have the kids watch it. It's called Apollo 13. I don't know. Has anybody seen that movie? Apollo 13. And he said this is a perfect example of an optimist and a pessimist in a life or death situation. So evidently they were in a situation where they had to bring a bunch of astronauts back from the far side of the moon. And they had to do it just by completing one small task at a time. And they faced impossible technical obstacles and breakdowns one after another. And they just had to keep thinking and thinking and thinking. And so in the middle of the ground control in Houston, one of the engineers spoke up and said, this is going to be the worst space disaster in American history. And then the ground commander, the optimist, spoke up and said, no, this is going to be our finest hour. And you can see how that demonstrates the life and death effectiveness of optimistic thinking. Because had the guy who was the pessimist been the one in control who said this is going to be the worst disaster in American space American history, and he was the one leading, they might not have ever brought those astronauts back. But instead, he wasn't the one in control. And thankfully, but it's just a perfect example of how you can see that your thinking, when you stop thinking, you fall into the slippery slope of becoming a pessimist. And if you just keep pushing, then you fall into, the optimist. And it's something that's only going to happen with practice. It doesn't happen overnight. I want to read to you guys this about what it says about pessimists. Whenever you feel pessimistic or overwhelmed, remember to keep thinking. That's just something to remind yourself of. If you struggle with pessimism, where people are always telling you, you're so pessimistic, or you see the grim side of things all the time, then just remind yourself that I need to keep thinking. The more you think about a situation, the more you will see small opportunities for action. And the more small actions that you take, the more optimistic energy you will begin to receive. An optimist keeps thinking and self-motivates. A pessimist quits thinking and then he just quits. Does that, I don't know, maybe that stings. Sorry guys, that might sting a little bit. It stung for me, but you know what, I don't know, there's some reality there. Now this is where it gets good. And this is where, it took some time for me to chew on this one. This is where he said society has some views, some preconceived notions about optimists. He said that most people in society, and I don't know if they did like a survey or how they concluded this, but they look at optimists as dopes. And they think that they're delusional because most optimists tend to think with their heart and not their head. And, okay. Whereas pessimists are more realistic. And most pessimists will never admit to being a pessimist, but rather will call themselves a realist. And I'm just going to keep going because I could comment and comment. Pessimists tend to use their imagination to visualize the worst case scenarios, which lead to lost causes, which leads to no action. And a lot of pessimistic thinking tends to lead to general passivity. A pessimist deep down will probably admit to the what's the use attitude, as they know it's not effective. But it's almost like, you know, this is the way I've always done it. We talked about that a couple days ago. Just because something's the way that you've always done it, it just could be that you didn't have the knowledge or the insight at that point in time. And when you know better, you do better. Optimists have chosen to make different use of their imagination. Imagination should not be used to escape reality, but to create reality. So, you know, that was an interesting chapter. Harry and I talked about it last night, and I think that there's opportunity for all of us to swing into both ways of thinking. You know, we have different scenarios, and I don't think it's black and white. I don't think any one of us at any time are always optimistic or any time are pessimistic. But I think there's opportunity here, because if you tend to fall into the category of seeing things as the glass half empty, or always, you know, gloom and doom, or whatever it is, to ask yourself, you know, are you happy with that? How does that make you feel? Do you ever feel defeated by that? You know, here's a really good quote. I don't know how many of you love Winston Churchill like me, but I love me some Winston Churchill quotes. So here's an awesome quote that I've always kind of written out and followed, and I just love this one. It says, "A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, while the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." That one's just beautiful. I love that one. And then here's the exercise that I had posted earlier that I was going to share. So if you find that you are the pessimist in your family, or that you are married to a pessimist, or you're dating one, or you're raising one, or you're the child of one, here is something that you can start to do today to help them. You know, it's not about forcing them to change. It's about helping them see that there might be a better way. And here's the question that here's the way that you can help them to learn to frame their statements. So when and we could do it by example, like I could easily say, you know, in the example that I gave about the garage, I could easily be the pessimist in that situation. If I went out to the garage and I saw that it was so much work, I could easily come back in and say, no way, nobody could ever do that in one day. And then here's the sentence that I would hope Harry would say to me, because here it is. So when you say something bad or negative, you have them finish the sentence with, "And that's just the way I want it." So if I came back in from the garage and I said, no way can anybody ever do that there's no way somebody could do that in one day, and then think, "And that's just the way I want it." No. Because if I think about, you know, moving into this house and how I, you know, subconsciously was terribly depressed because we moved from a house that we had just remodeled. It had a new beautiful kitchen. It was gorgeous, to a home that is just as beautiful in different ways, but I struggled with it because it wasn't perfect yet. And in that lack of perfection, I got really blue and depressed, you guys. I mean, here I was a life coach and I was struggling, but that's where I leveraged my life coaching tools for doing my own therapy, y'all. I could have easily used this sentence then. Had I said to myself, you know what, this house isn't going to look like what I want it to look like if I unpack all this crap. I'll just make more work for myself. So if I can't unpack it now to make it look pretty, if I can't make it look good in the way it's going to look, I'm not doing any of it. If I'd have just finished that thought with, "And that's just the way I want it," I would have sat in that pile of poop and it probably would have slapped me out of my own funk, my own pity party. And it would have made me realize that, you know what? No, I need to keep thinking. What am I? Who the heck am I? What have I become? No. Just no. So if you have somebody in your life that suffers from pessimism, use that line. Write it down. When somebody lays that nasty egg, you give it back to them and say, and that's just the way I want it, and that's just the way you want it. Teach them that, you know. I mean, it's not about changing them. It's about helping them to see that there's a better way. So there you go. That was day number 53. Day number 54 will be interesting. I'm sure of it. So, all right, guys. Have a good day. Bye.